we are badly needed and long overdue. A controversial podcast about Colorado Springs. It's controversial because it makes sense. I'm your host, Nick Raven, and joining me virtually to my left and to your right is my co-host, epic TikToker who has produced so many TikTok videos, navigator and co-host, Emily Lewis. How are you doing, Emily?
I am doing well, Nick.
Excellent.
I am excited for this episode.
Yes.
Fair warning for everyone, it gets a little spicy.
It gets a little spicy.
Just so you're aware.
It wasn't my intention to deny the spice, but it was to be like, all right, we could start a whole block on fire if we don't kind of rein it in a little bit.
Nick did have a hard time, reining in some of us.
We did. You guys did good. This is obviously a very passionate topic, and as I explained in the actual interview, I'm not familiar with the City Aud. I moved here late. I was too old to really. There are so many things I did not get to experience here in the city, like the Pioneers Museum. The City Aud's one of them, and so. I'm in this interview. I'm kind of on the sideline, just kind of like, so hey, what do you think about this? Doing the host thing, and
you're trying to lead us places that we refuse to go.
I'm trying. Yeah. I'm not. It wasn't quite herding cats, but I mean, it really did. I was not expecting. I guess just the passionate response to what's been going on with the restoration of but still planned mostly restoration effort for the City Aud. And the City Aud has been here for a century. That's something you talk about early on. It's been a fixture of the city, but it's from another era before there was the End Center, before there's these venues around town. And so trying to find relevance, we're going to get into it. My good friend, Viktoria Costantino is on here. We've known each other for years and years. We had another podcast at the End Forum elsewhere. We've known each other. She is a very huge fan of the City Aud. She has history, so it was like, hey, we're doing a City Aud episode. You should come hop on and be with us. And she's like, yep. And so there's a lot of synergy there, and it was really good to hear the conversation there. So
it was.
So that being said, I think we can get into the interview.
Let's do it.
Let's talk about the City Aud, all right?
Yes.
Boom.
Boom.
We're going to talk about the City Aud.
Yay.
Yeah, Emily, you have some perspective on this. What the heck is the City Aud?
The City Aud is first and foremost a beautiful, beautiful building in the heart of downtown Colorado Springs. She's been around for almost 100 years. She was the host of a lot of really, how do I want to even say it? You're going to have to edit all this out because my brain is gone as soon as you ask me the question.
Yeah, exactly.
It just left. It's like, nah. She was built in 24, I believe.
I would say 2040. It's like, wow.
No, built in 24, and then they had all kinds of things that they had, like USO shows, everything else. I said she's first and foremost a beautiful, beautiful example of architecture. One of the architects was Thomas McLaren, who went on to be kind of a really big fucking deal. She's amazing and is currently undergoing a whole new thing. They're gutting her and turning her into a really interesting multi-purpose kind of venue again.
Yeah, that's so. When did you first go to the Aud there, Emily? Because
oh geez, okay.
I'll mention it again because we're going to mention it in the intro that we're going to shoot after this. Is that we all watched Grand Old Lady, which is the new documentary behind Linda Weiss and her restoration of the City Aud that's due due to be completed like the end of next year, or 2024 is when they're planning on bringing it all back. They're adding all kinds of new stuff. But one of the things I mentioned is like, oh, that's where I went to see Rocky Poor Picture Show.
Yes.
What are some of your earliest memories there?
My earliest memory is actually Rocky Horror. I was a alternative teenager, and Rocky Horror played a really big part of my friend group. And so it was probably, I want to say like mid 80s. First time I went and saw Rocky Horror Picture Show live, which of course blew my mind. I had no understanding that this was this huge interactive thing. And seeing that first and foremost on the stage at the City Aud was incredible. I've never seen it anywhere else done live like it was there, because of the City Aud has amazing acoustics first and foremost. And it was, oh my gosh, I was a teenager, and it blew my mind. It absolutely blew my mind. And then in 86, dating myself here.
Before some of us were even born, yes. Yeah.
Shut up. We won't talk about how old I was in 86. Thank you. Well, in 86, I went and saw an actual concert at the City Aud. And I can't believe I'm going to admit who this was. So anyway, I saw Crocus at the City Aud in
I don't know who that is.
1986. And then later went and saw Korn with Danzig and Marilyn Manson.
Oh my God.
At the City Aud. And that was in 94, 95 time frame.
94 for 95 for Marilyn Manson and Korn.
Yeah.
That's
yeah. Because they did every once in a while, they would have some like concerts at the City Aud. And if you could score tickets, it was great because they were super, super cheap.
Call in the next 5 minutes cheap. And you get the tickets to Korn and Marilyn Manson and Danzig at the City Aud.
Now look, Nick.
What? I remember those days.
And then in 96, when we were in the middle of the still dealing with the fallout from Amendment 2 here in Colorado, they actually had I don't know if either one of you even know what I'm going to be talking about here.
I do, but
during the height of the AIDS crisis, they started this AIDS Quilt. And basically it was people that had died of AIDS, their loved ones would create a quilt square out of some of their most cherished things, t-shirts, whatever. And they would send it off to this AIDS Quilt project, and they would add that square to the quilt. And it was massive. It was absolutely massive. And then they would tour this quilt around all over the country, so people had an opportunity to see it and to really learn about what the AIDS crisis really was and what it actually looked like, and to bring a face to this epidemic. And in 96, they brought the AIDS Quilt to Colorado Springs, and it was displayed in the City Aud. I remember walking in, and everywhere you looked in the upper stands and everything, this quilt is just draped. These pieces of this quilt were just draped and set up all in the main area. And they were reading the names of all the people who had a contribution made to this quilt who had died of AIDS. Because even back in the 90s, you didn't live with AIDS. If you got HIV and it became AIDS, then you just died.
Yeah.
and we had a family friend that had died a couple years, well, about maybe 2 years before of AIDS. And it was, that was probably the most powerful thing that I've ever seen at the City Aud. And again, it seeing something like that in the context of this beautiful space in this historic kind of place it was a lot. Not even gonna lie, it was a lot.
It's even here, just wow, absolutely.
Yeah, it was.
This was a venue that, unfortunately, I came to Colorado Springs. I came in '97, and it was a little too late for me, so I don't have any City Aud memories. But Victoria, you did. This was something that was important to you. Like, you got to have school functions and stuff. I know you, like, both of you really got to. What's your history? What are your earliest memories of the City Aud?
So the City Auditorium has a very special place in my heart, especially the Lon Chaney Theater, which is the small theater that's attached to the main event area. When some kids are growing up, they go to camp. Well, I go to theater camp because I was a big dork.
Yep.
So
that's all of us here. Don't worry.
Yeah. So I think I was maybe 8 or 9 years old when I went to my first theater camp over in the Lon Chaney Theater, and it was a city-run camp, with Parks and Rec department, and I stayed with that theater camp. I graduated out of it. I think the age was 16. I came back after I was 16 so that I could volunteer with the camp, because I loved that building. We would host, our plays in that little theater and be able to go backstage and to go, into the groundskeepers' quarters, and really learn about the building. Almost every time we had one of our camps, we would have tours of the building, and we would be able to go into the basement where you learned all of the urban legends, ghost stories.
Yep. There's a lot.
And there are a lot, but there's a lot that's also very, very true. And I love that building because of those intricate stories, a glimpse into Colorado Springs that you don't get to see very often anymore. So, I've been down to the basement, I've been into the main stage, been backstage, been up near the catwalk. I have attended dozens of events there outside of my childhood experience. I remember walking in to the main space at one point where they were showing old silent films, and they would hold lunches, primarily for seniors, and they would be playing the organ. And it was just such an experience that you were never going to get anywhere else in the Springs, let alone this area. So I watched the Grand Old Lady video as well. I actually sent it over to Nick because I knew that we needed to talk about this. I have a lot of feelings about this renovation.
Me too.
Yeah, I know you both do. Yeah.
Both good and bad. Because the most recent events that I have attended there have also been large concerts. I saw... Let's see, I think I was 12 when I saw Weird Al Yankovic there, which was a blast.
Yes.
And I saw 30 Seconds to Mars there, I think it was 2014 maybe. Around that time. And I'm sitting here loving it, but knowing how much trouble they're dealing with backstage. And the concert didn't start, I think, until like 2 hours later or something. They had so many technical difficulties.
Yeah, I forgot about that one.
The crowd was outside. Oh, it was awful. Anybody that knows and loves that place knows it needs help. Absolutely.
Yes.
It is an old lady.
So there was a lot of deferred maintenance because in the documentary, this was put on by I can't remember the body, but it's a It's like a nonprofit. It's like the Creative Commons Solutions. I totally screwing it
I
up.
believe it was formed for the auditorium.
It was formed for the auditorium
Yeah.
as the body to handle.
It is the Community Cultural Collective.
There you go. Yeah, and I ran into Linda Weiss the other day, and she's such a glowing presence. So seeing her in the documentary and then seeing her in person, it's like, oh, hello, how are you doing? But she's very passionate about that, and seeing, again, not having a history. Obviously, a lot of people, they had Leon Kelly in there, Dr. Leon Kelly in there giving his story about what there's like a lack of cultural center, and it seems like that was a really big deal when it was around and working, but the facility, like deferred maintenance, I don't know when the troubles really, it seemed like it was an increasing lag over time, and then now it's, I don't know if it's like
city,
shut down or what happened.
Honestly, the city stopped using the auditorium for most of the events that had been held there before.
Mm-hmm.
And as the city started tapering off and going and doing this in places, I know that there were a couple of events that they used to hold at the City Aud that they actually wound up moving to a ballroom at the Broadmoor, or things like that. The less the city used it, the less they wanted to pay attention to what was needed, and just kind of meh. It's fine. There was talk back in the 80s, I want to say, maybe. There was talk for a little while about just demolishing the building and turning it into like something else, probably a parking lot.
Someone's excited to go figure that out.
Yeah. But no, and I was wrong. It was it actually opened in 23.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I said I graduated from college on this stage at the City Aud. And that's just, it's, but again, like the city just stopped treating her well.
That's what it's.
And the more, like I said, the more they forgot about her, the more they just, we don't want to deal with this. This is somebody else's problem. This is somebody else's problem. Except for technically it was the city's problem.
Yeah, because they owned it.
Yeah, they just didn't care. They just didn't care to, what's the, blah. That's why we can't do 2 in a day, Nick. My brain is gone.
Let's talk about water.
Gone.
Yeah. But no, you touch on 2 things, and one of the things that actually kind of irritated me in the documentary was Mayor Souther's like, well, it's pretty great to be able to hand this thing off to a private entity so that the taxpayers are relieved of the price of administering and maintaining this structure. And it's like, you dork. Dude, my dude,
is that the word we're going to use?
Yeah, that's
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll let you use that word.
You dork, and not in a good way. Like, we're dorks, but in a good way. That's a bad dork. Like him just wanting to defer responsibility to the philanthropists and the nonprofits to handle things that the city should be. There's a reason why the city doesn't have a cultural center. It's because the city is not interested in administering culture. They don't want to. They don't believe in spending taxpayer money. Like,
well, and that's the thing. They didn't even ask us if we wanted to. They just assumed.
that
we don't want to pay for this, so we're not even going to ask. We're not going to talk to anybody about it. We're just going to let it sit over here and quietly rot into the ground.
Victoria, do you have memories of like kind of as it was like tapering out, and because again, I don't have this history at all, but when it seemed like the Aud was in crisis.
Oh gosh.
You watch it happen. You
do. You watch it happen. I literally cannot tell you how many things that I've been to there, and I've been very lucky and very blessed. But to every time you sit in those folding chairs and they start creaking more and more every year, and I was literally there. I think 2 months ago for the Small Business Week event. And it was over in the Lon Chaney Theater. And to sit in those chairs and to, first of all, barely fit into those chairs because Americans have changed size quite a bit. In the past 100 years.
Right?
But also to just simply be sitting in those chairs, feeling it rotting below your feet, below your body, was just shocking. And there are these beautiful murals that have just faded and withered with age, and the flooring is falling apart. Everywhere you look, it's falling apart, where you can see where there was glory to the city, is I think what their phrase was. And it is completely worn. It is heartbreaking. It is utterly heartbreaking.
Yeah.
100%. You know, you look at just the difference between 2 years of, you know, when I graduated college, and then the next year when a friend of mine graduated, and you could see the neglect. You could see that every event that they had there, because they had like, you know, the metaphysical fairs would be there or whatever else. And you can see the bumps and the new bumps and bruises of the walls, the floor, the everything. And it, like I said, like Victoria said, watching it just rot underneath you is heartbreaking. And it is honestly, it makes you angry. It makes you angry, because she should have been the jewel in this, you know, in our downtown area. And you talk to people now, and they have maybe kind of an understanding of that the building exists, but they don't know anything about it. And that is, for me, that's shameful. That's shameful that people don't know that the city auditorium is the city auditorium, and, you know, it was created for these events, and instead we're shipping these events off to, you know, to the Ent Center or to the World Arena or whatever, you know, that abandoned shopping center over there on, what is that, Academy and Galley or something.
Oh gosh.
Oh, the event center that used to be Cowboys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, and
altered reality, I think.
Yeah. And, you know, and we have the City Aud sitting here just falling apart because nobody's using her.
And the city's not giving a fuck.
And you see it. You see it when there's no elevators up to the second floor, and nobody has bothered to keep up with the most simple accommodations.
The ADA compliance.
To get people simple, straightforward. Of course, nobody's going to use it if you don't install an elevator. Of course, nobody's going to use it if you have 4 bathroom stalls and you're hosting thousands of people. Of course, it makes sense to me why nobody would want to use that building, because of how poorly maintained it has been over the decades.
I don't know if you know this, but in the 1920s, Americans didn't pee.
Oh, apparently not.
Well, see, now we learn something new every day. So they just didn't.
I just discovered that just now, apparently based on the design of this building. And you certainly didn't need to go up to the second floor for any reason whatsoever.
Well, no, you could go up to the second floor. There were no disabled people in the 20s.
There were none.
They
none.
didn't exist.
Okay.
They have beautiful staircases, but no elevators.
Yes. Okay, so just so everybody knows, before we get a ton of hate mail, yes, we know that there were disabled people in the 20s, and we know that people peed in the 20s as well. We really do know these things.
Yes.
We do. I promise.
Yes. We just didn't have any accommodations for them whatsoever.
No.
That's why we had giant suits. So this restoration, I guess, started coming about passionate people with lots of money, kind of to restore this thing and basically get it off of the city's binders, essentially, to make this real. Yeah, exactly. And so there's a new documentary. I'd recommend everyone check it out, because it lays out very passionately what the plan is, what the idea is for the City Aud. I'd love to, we'll start with Victoria. What are some positives about what you see about going forward with this restoration?
I am so glad that people care enough to put in the lengthy effort that they are wanting to put into the auditorium. And it's the effort that it deserves. I teach at Pikes Peak now State College, not community college. And I have always wondered why we have such a local college presence that very rarely or unknowingly is taking advantage of the city auditorium. Well, I'm glad that they're making room for that. I really am. The manner of which they're doing all of these things, that's a later conversation.
Yeah.
But all in all, I'm just glad it's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Finally.
Yeah. Emily, what you think? What you think?
Well, that's really my big positive as well is that people realize and understand that this is an historic building and something that really, really deserves to be why can't I say words, Nick? Really deserves to be renovated and restored to its former glory. However,
yeah, I guess we could switch over to the negatives here, because I know there are some concerns and some feedback that needs to be delivered to the proper departments. Emily, go.
Well, essentially, where to start? The idea that
where to start?
That you need to walk into this space and chop it up into all of these other little, like, it is an office with cubicles is what they're essentially turning this into, instead of this amazing large scale event space, which we still have use for in Colorado Springs,
especially by the way, as big as we are.
So going in and chopping it up, and yes, they have some amazing things they want to put in there. You could do that without the destruction of the essential heart of what is the city auditorium. That's my biggest bitch about the whole thing, is the coming in and the chopping it up. And not to mention the fact that they are also talking about adding on a whole addition
They're adding
area.
a whole wing.
And then doing, something to the outside of the city Aud. I will tell you right now, if they touch anything on the front of that building, I'm going to be out there padlocking myself to the doors of the city Aud.
I was going to say there's no trees. You can't climb in a tree and just camp out.
I can't climb in a tree.
There's
no.
You're not chopping me down.
Exactly. And I think that's really my biggest bitch. Like I said, is the fact that there are ways to do this that have been ignored for profit, honestly, that have been ignored for profit. Yeah. So getting off my soapbox now.
That's
okay, because I'm just going to get on to mine soon.
Yeah, go ahead.
So,
where to start?
God, again, where to start? So the Little Theater, colloquially known as the Little Theater.
Yes.
Lon Chaney's Theater, right? It's got the little sign on the outside. That's where my love for the auditorium comes from. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you that watching this documentary, this story of what they're wanting to do to the auditorium, and having half the interviews take place there, and to not once really talk about who Lon Chaney is and why he is important to Colorado Springs, and that they plan on entirely gutting that space, shredded me to tears.
Yes.
I was falling apart to see them not address this very important subject. Lon Chaney was a very popular silent film actor known as the Man of a Thousand Faces. I believe, don't 100% credit me on this, that both of his parents were either deaf or hard of hearing, went to the School for the Deaf and Blind. He was a very, very prominent figure in Colorado Springs during that time period, and especially for film communities, queer communities across the board. And to have that jewel of the city auditorium entirely glazed over felt like a huge amount of disrespect for people not just like me, but who also love that space. That is where, my mind goes back when I have dreams and I, going through some crazy scenario in my head, but I'm in the Lon Chaney Theater. That is where they did the Rocky Horror Picture shows. That is how you get to all those dressing rooms, is through that hallway behind it. And to watch that be entirely glazed over was just utterly shocking to me.
Yep. Well, and I think that's part of it too, is I understand that the cultural collective has an understanding of what the City Aud is. But honestly, I don't necessarily know that they're bringing in people who have a real, honest understanding of what the City Aud means, what that means to those of us that have been going there since we were kids, that have all of these memories that are wrapped up in the Lon Chaney Theater, that are wrapped up in the City Aud as a whole. And I know with the documentary that they talked to people and they had people on that did this or did that or whatever. The passion for renovating the City Aud should not be based on, I don't even know how to put it. It feels very disrespectful.
Yes.
Simply because there is so much emotional, so many emotions are tied up into this building. And yes, it is a building, but you know what? The City Aud is something special, and she is something amazing. And I don't want to just see the outside of the City Aud and know that none of that history of the people, not of the people who built it, or the not even the artists that did the murals or anything else, all of that, it's great to save all that, but the not saving the history of the people who have walked through those doors and have spent so much of their lives in that space it's disrespectful. It is absolutely fucking disrespectful.
There's 100 years of stories in that building, and to exclusively focus on the architect and the artists, while that is important, that is not the entire story. That
no, it's not even
tell the story. Not at all. Not
that
even
much of the story.
Even part of it. No, everyone knows how quickly Colorado Springs has grown and changed, and that is why we are here.
Yep.
And to see that completely glazed over for what feels like what I lovingly called beige land.
Yes.
It's incredibly disappointing.
See, and I feel this whenever Nick and I talked about doing this episode, I'm like, okay, I'm going to say things and somebody somewhere is going to get mad at me. And I do apologize. I do apologize to the Community Culture Collective that are putting this together and that are putting in the time and the effort and the money to do this. It feels almost okay. There was something here. Essentially, it feels like they're taking this space and almost creating it has almost a mall shopping center kind of feel to it. It's like, well, in this room you do this, and in this room you do that, and then over here you do this, instead of the focus being on the entirety of the building and the history and the things that happened there already. And it's, I don't know, man. It makes me sad. It really does. It makes me sad. And Nick, it breaks my heart that you did not have these kind of experiences simply because I think that's one of the things that brings so many of us together as, you know, what do they call us? Colorado Springsians.
Springsians.
You know, is and whether we're transplant or not.
Yeah.
The City Aud, for so many, especially of my generation, honestly, and you know, generations older, but you know, that's boomers and they're fine. Is so many of our shared experiences have the City Aud in common. And like I said before, I don't think that those are the things that are being taken into consideration with this renovation, with this chopping up and adding things on, and you know, let's gut this and do that and blah blah blah. Again, the only word I can think of is disrespectful. It is just disrespectful. It does not show any.
Well, here's what I say. You know, it sounds like there's some respect for the creative consortium for getting it together, but I mean, there's really no apologies needed if they're gonna fuck it up. Honestly, I like, if you're gonna do it the right way. And from hearing what you guys are saying, it sounds like this is supposed to try and fill in for what a convention center would do in any other city, where you can have spaces that are of multiple size and modular and big and small for gatherings of different sizes and this and that. And they're trying to do that with the City Aud. And again, the city's trying to get it off their books so that the taxpayer's not on the hook for it. But since we won't invest in a city convention center and the Broadmoors locked that up through lobbying and the city charter and stuff like that, it sounds like this is the best way forward. And the City Aud just happens to... It seems like a lot of the respect that it's gotten is because they aren't demolishing it. And I know that was a popular movement in the 80s, was to just destroy things like the Chief Theater.
Just tear it down.
Isn't it heartbreaking that that's the bare minimum? The bare minimum is to not destroy.
Not completely destroy it.
Not completely destroy what we're all yearning for, which is just a place of community gathering that we have lost so rapidly as our city's grown. Yeah. We don't have that singular place of community. It's not the World Arena. It's not the Pikes Peak Center. It's not the Ent Center. And as great as those buildings are for their use, that's what the City Auditorium was for, regardless of how quickly we've grown. We made the choice not to take care of it for decades.
Exactly.
We should be the ones paying it back.
Yeah.
Yep. 100%. You know, I'm looking at this this article from, I don't know. I don't even know who did it.
Person.
Basically, and there's a breakdown here of the plan for the overall space. And they're talking, you know, ground floor retail partners. I don't want to go to a store inside the City Aud. I don't want to go buy bagels inside the City Aud. That's just not a thing.
No.
Don't you want to exit through the gift shop?
No.
Okay.
No, Nick, no.
Okay.
No.
All right. I'll trust you on that one.
It's
yeah.
I said I'm looking at this, and you know, studio and office space for the Colorado Springs Conservatory. Great. That space already could exist
in all of the numerous amount of business parks that are laying empty.
Yeah. You know, large format rehearsal and education studios also available for event rental. Like I said, they're chopping up the City Aud and turning it into a one-stop shopping center, literally a shopping center. And it is absolute, total, and complete bullshit.
Let me pitch this to you, and I'll ask Victoria first. If this were not something that the city were just basically taking care of, like any other city would take care of, is there a way that this building even survives unless it is basically retooled for this mixed use? Now, I'm as a zoning city urban aficionado planner, like the idea of a mixed use venue is pretty great, but maybe not as, turning the City Aud into it. So, but I'm wondering, is there any way that the City Aud exists outside of the city's funding that isn't then just torn down and turned into luxury apartments or moved offsite? Because you guys mentioned all these other venues, Pikes Peak Center, Ent Center. There's that new amphitheater going up on the north end, stuff like that, but they're happening further and further and further and further away from downtown. And it's like, this is the one opportunity to have something downtown. I mean, it's literally a stone's throw from City Hall. And we can talk about the tunnel that runs between them, from Prohibition era in a little bit. Yes. But Victoria, is there any way that this building would have survived if a nonprofit or some beneficiary like Linda Weiss steps in and says, it's not going to be like what it was, but this is the best that we get?
Well, that's definitely the question, right? As someone who considers themselves a mostly native, right?
I put it in I put it in your title, so
yeah, it's my little title there. I do feel like I'm one of the very few solid millennials who has any sort of love for that building, and just from my own personal experience, I know people who have no idea what that building is, no matter how many times they've been downtown. But to me, it's the question of always going back, well, who is responsible for allowing that to happen in our community, in our culture? Are there other venues? Yeah, there's a brand new wedding venue 4 blocks away, on Wasatch.
Yep.
Something along those lines. Maybe it's on Pikes Peak and Wasatch, maybe.
Yeah, it's right there, Pikes Peak and Wasatch, the old attached to the old Goodwill building. You've seen it,
right?
Nick.
I'm sure I have.
It's right there on the corner by the house.
Okay.
The big white building.
Is that the one you like?
Yeah, the one I love.
That they're turning into that? Okay.
Well, no, part of it is a new.
Gotcha. Part of it is
venue.
Okay.
It's a new wedding venue. Right?
Gotcha.
And. Also words, right?
Yes.
Words. How do they work? Yeah.
This is the only reason why I am so grateful that this is finally happening, is because I'm not sure that anybody else would be motivated to do something about it. And I like to think that there would be. But just from my experience, I'm the only one I know that gives 2 shits about that. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can I swear on this podcast? Yeah.
I was shocked when I discussed this with you, Nick, that you were interested in the topic, because I have known so few people that care about that building. It is a rare conversation to have now. But again, who is responsible for that? Right. The city was responsible for that. The city is responsible for losing it, so the city needs to be responsible for bringing it back. And it is really upsetting that it's not.
100%.
Yeah. What are you thinking? Who owns that space if the city's not going to own that? And does it exist? Is there any way that it's not torn down and turned into another eatery?
Okay, realistically, probably not. I think that this is probably because we are Colorado Springs, this is our best case scenario for saving the City Aud from just total fucking demolition. Like we were saying earlier, though, why does this have to be our benchmark here? It's better than nothing. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, yes, but also, why does that have to be just what we get? The city has for, I'm sorry, for 100 fucking years, the city has done the city Aud wrong. They've, and like I said, they've never asked the taxpayers if we want to contribute to taking care of this, or if we want to contribute to whatever else. They just assumed that no, we wouldn't want to do that, and just said no and let it fall apart, and then pawn it off on somebody else to do with as they wish. And it's, again, best case scenario, this is what we have. At least something is being done. But looking at the responsibility should have always been the city of Colorado Springs. And even if they never did anything to renovate or whatever else, just taking care of the city Aud in its current iteration should have been enough. We wouldn't be sitting here going, well, at least they're not tearing it down because they've let it rot on the corner.
Yeah.
And no, you're right, they're not tearing it down, but
you walk by that building and you really don't get a feel for what it is. And that's one thing that, like, it's a very, as someone who, again, doesn't have a history with it, like, walking past it, it's this very, like, Greco-Roman styling of that era, like, pre-Art Deco. And there's, like, the murals which they do talk about in the Grand Old Lady, the WPA-funded murals in there. Like, from the outside, it's like, here's this really interesting classical building. What the fuck is it? I don't get that vibe at all. And maybe that'll get, I don't know, like some image renovation or something, or maybe they'll promote it or something.
The biggest thing is, no, they're not tearing it down. But then they're also not tearing it down because so much of what they're doing is going in and gutting the entire shell. The outside is as amazing as it is, yes, and as beautiful as it is, that is not what made the city Aud. It was what happened inside. And so they're keeping the outside, and that's fine, because like I said, don't let them touch the outside.
Yeah. Because
I will chain myself to a door. However, if I could go chain myself to the floor or to the stage in the main area of the city Aud, so that they couldn't tear that down either. Listen, I'm looking at these plans, and it's.
Now, Vic, I want to ask you, like, the additions that they are doing, all the add-ons so that, like, delivery drivers don't have to drive to the street and do drop-offs and stuff like that, the backstage area that they're adding for productions that there hasn't been before. Like, is there really a benefit to all of that addition there that they're going to be doing?
Well, I can tell you that from what I remember from concerts there, do they need the space? Yeah. I mean, yeah. The thing is, I feel like this entire renovation, everything about it this is what is logical, but this is not what follows the heart of the people that love the building.
Yep.
And the people that have that heart were never asked, never consulted, never involved. And this video really makes it seem like it was. But once you look at it, you would see that maybe that's not entirely true. We've been through the building for the Ent Center. Just happened. Where was this conversation then? And I know that belongs to UCCS, and that's a whole other story. But
it's completely different thing.
This conversation, it could have happened 20, 30, 40 years ago, and it didn't. So now we are stuck with best case scenario. Yeah, we know it needs help. Yeah, it needs, these are the modern accommodations it needs for large stage show productions. Yeah, it needs all of those things, but we are losing the heart and soul of what is in that building.
Yep. 100%.
I don't see where that compromise happened. No. Because of course you're going to lose some, you're going to gain others, sure. But I don't see that. I don't see that at all in this round.
No, I don't. I'm with you, Victoria. I do not see a compromise of what the City Aud means and what this plan for what's happening inside actually is. And I'm going to tell you right now, this is going to turn into another. I don't know. I can't even think of what I want to compare it to, because it's none of this has been done with the people who without having money. Now here's where the difference is. The people who love the City Aud but who don't have any money. Some of the people that they showed talking about, how much they love the City Auditorium and all these memories they have of the City Auditorium. These are all people who are coming at the City Aud from a place of privilege, first and foremost. These are the people with money.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love the City Aud. I have loved the City Aud since I was little. I don't have any money. They don't care what I have to say. They don't care what I think.
Yes.
Because they're with this being a private enterprise, they're looking at the City Aud as, how do we make this profitable? And in order to make it profitable, they have to chop her up into tiny little pieces and let people rent her. And it's gross. It's gross. I'm going to step away. I'm not going far. I'm just moving away from the camera.
It seems like there's multiple, I don't want to say like villains here, but it seems like the real villainy here is just not
it's the city of Colorado Springs.
It is.
That's the bad guy.
That's the bad. It's like they're the ones who are like letting this happen or not letting things happen. And I wrote a big story about Manitou and what they did to restore their prized possessions and property there. Now, they had some dedicated artists that were like, yo, we'll volunteer our time and money to help restore these places. But it wasn't until Match came along, which is a 0.3% sales tax in Manitou, that it goes specifically to 5 buildings, 5 facilities within Manitou, and then there's a competitive grant. And Denver had implemented one back in the late 80s. It was 0.1%. Over the past 25 years, they've been able to raise $1 billion across the region for arts. And Colorado Springs, they've tried a couple times. I think the last time was about a decade ago, kind of maybe alongside the city council pay raise, which is a whole other episode by itself. But the idea that you could put a 0.1% arts tax on the Colorado Springs ballot, I'm sure you could get people to get behind that and then have that fund City Aud or some other venue. I don't even know what venue you would, because you can't pry that from these private hands anymore.
Yeah, but that's the thing is there has never been, as far as I know, I could be wrong. I did not do my due diligence research, whatever, on this episode as much as I probably should have. However, there has never been a ballot initiative to talk about funding for the city auditorium. Never, not once, never has the city asked us as taxpayers, us as citizens of Colorado Springs, to do something to help maintain the City Aud. Never. Because I know I've said it, I've touched on it more than once. This has never been something that was given to us. They basically just shoved it in the closet and were like, no, we're not dealing with it anymore. It's whatever. If somebody comes in and takes it over, great. Otherwise, she can just sit until she's reduced to a pile of rubble.
True. Now, Vic, what do you think about the city, like, eventually having a reckoning and realizing that, hey, maybe we should do... I don't think there's any possibility that the city takes over unless they guarantee funds. But, if they are going to convert it into this theater airport venue, where you pay $10 for bags of Haribo,
right?
It doesn't seem like there's any way that it's going to come out of that unless there's something just very drastic that happens.
Nothing's going to change.
Nothing will change. Unless somebody comes to the city and says, hey, we're going to make it into a church, it's not going to be anything.
Fantastic. Great episode, everyone.
That's about it. And, I'm saying that as somebody who loves this city and loves that building and hell loves churches in downtown. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, I do think this is the only way that building is going to maintain any sort of presence in the Springs. Yep. If something did happen, I would be more shocked than anybody. For the majority of my life, I have been looking at ways to get involved with the city auditorium, and it just has not been available. No. Unlike other aspects in Colorado Springs where there's, the Friends of, Bear Creek Park, for example, there has been nothing like that for community members to be involved in that building.
Nope.
So we're just reduced to letting it become what it's going to become, and seemingly just feeling upset about it. And that's, yeah. That's really not listening to your community.
Yeah.
No, we just sit here and be mad while they do whatever they want to do, because, they've never asked us. They've never given us an opportunity to be involved, for anything.
Well, and what a disrespect to Thomas McLaren. He built dozens of the most particularly unique Colorado Springs buildings with a passion and with a purpose.
Yep.
There's even a charter school named after him.
My kid went to that school.
and I worked for that school for a little while. And it just feels like it is such disrespect for everyone over the past 100 years that has loved that building.
Yeah.
Except for the fact that they're willing to do literally bare minimum, something.
Yeah, something.
They're willing to do something, and that's
Exactly. Yeah, that was my whole thing. Whenever I first heard that they were, talking about doing something with the City Aud, and my first thought was, finally, yes, we're going to get something. Something is happening here, and then here we go. Like I said, I'm looking at these plans, and like I said, they're talking, retail space and. Essentially rooms for rent for event, for corporate event kind of things. Not even, because I know that the City Aud was always available for
mixed use. Like you could have corporate events. Yeah.
Sure.
But that was
not its primary purpose.
No,
that was never the goal. The goal of that building was to be a community space. Mm-hmm. And I cannot see where the community space is here. I'm glad that they are involving the local colleges. Mm-hmm. First of all, they should have been doing that for the past 40 years, but also just because you're utilizing that doesn't mean you're actually taking the additional step of making it available to your community. Mm-hmm. Just because you're involved with the school doesn't just inherently mean that. It just opens a door. Well, you open the door and you didn't walk through it. So you've got to collect all of these things to make it a community space instead of just a shopping center.
Yeah, I'm looking at this again at this article, and it says in 1923, the city auditorium opened following a culmination of community-driven efforts to create a large, multi-purpose meeting and entertainment facility for the city of Colorado Springs. That is what she was built for. That is everything that she is supposed to exist for. And instead of realizing that dream ever, I mean, in the 20s and the early 30s, that is exactly what she was being used for. She was being used for community events. She was being used for, all of these amazing things. And then slowly but surely, year by year, just less and less and less and less, because she wasn't being taken care of, because she was already being allowed to fall into disrepair.
Right.
And, like Victoria said earlier, when you let something fall apart, no, people aren't going to want to use it because it's falling apart. But it never should have gotten to that place in the first place. She should have been cared for. She should have been, loved and appreciated from day one. And yes, the number of people who do not know what the City Auditorium is, or what has happened there, or even going back to who built it, who designed this building, is sad. I mean, Colorado Springs has a very long history of just tearing down our history to build some shiny new thing. And we look at it now. Nick and I were at where were we, Nick? At Burnt Toast.
Yeah.
And looking out, and you have this beautiful courthouse, and you have the City Auditorium that you can see, and then behind it you have all these ridiculous, tacky, just thrown together pieces of building, because those were the new and shiny, happy, yay, modernize. Why?
It's actually interesting because, like, you can see where the future happened. You have City Hall, and then you look at the expansion that they had, that curvature there, that looks so awkward because it's just this geometric shape that they stapled onto, again, this, like, kind of classical masonry look, what the columns and stuff like that. And then behind it, you just have this Lego brick of a bland-ass courthouse right behind it. And then you have City Aud on the other corner. So you have these very of that era buildings, even though they're, I don't know, like
and again, Colorado Springs has a long history of doing that.
Yeah.
They have a long history of tearing down the historical to put up the new and shiny that in 20 years looks ridiculous.
Yeah.
It looks dated.
There's that Hyatt Regency right across the street from City Hall that looms over it. And it's like, I'm glad we have, I mean, those are probably going to be apartments in 5 to 10 years, but it's it's relatively tacky looking compared to what's over there. So, whatever. I
could bitch about this for days.
I was going to say, we're not going to let that happen. So we have a lot of fuel, but I do want to have you guys kind of close out. And maybe there's a silver lining here. Like, I'm glad it exists, but maybe it could re-enter the cultural consciousness here in town as, man, I'm going to go down to the City Aud instead of I'm going to the Black Sheep or, any of these other venues. I mean, because the Ent Center has its flaws. It doesn't even have a symphony pit. Like, it's so strange. The Ent Center is such a bit, I love the Ent Center, but it was great. Yeah. But at the same time, it's like, we have to stop letting the philanthropists take control of our culture, because there's only, like, General Palmer only had so much money, right? Carney, he only had so much money. This should be a municipal issue. So, Victoria, what are some closing thoughts you have on the City Aud, with all that said, and without starting any fires for the sake of the house?
Without starting any fires, okay.
Yeah. Keep the fuel in the closet for another day.
It away.
Yeah.
All things considered, I am happy it will continue to be a presence in the Springs. I am thrilled that I will be able to take my son to the City Auditorium and be able to tell him this is where Mama grew up. That is something that's incredibly important for me. If all else fails, this is still an important part of the community, and I got to watch it evolve into what we know today. And I'm hoping that we can learn some lessons from this, and I hope that it will really grow into a good space for our rapidly changing downtown. And I'm here for the ride. We'll see what happens, but I'm here for it.
All right. Yeah. I agree with the rapidly changing downtown, but yeah, definitely, Emily.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so I do want to say, in the event that, someone from the Community Cultural Collective does happen to see and or hear our little podcast, I am grateful that the Community Cultural Collective has taken on doing a thing with the City Aud, because I think losing her completely would be devastating. I do wish that it had been done in a more community-minded way, but I am glad that they're doing something with her. And knowing that, again, as Viktoria said, knowing that she's still going to be around, is important. I think the building itself is important and does need to be recognized as that. I'm having a real hard time not starting any fires here, Nick. I am
light a match.
I am grateful that they are doing something with her. That's where I have to stop, because that's really the, that's really where we stand. I'm grateful something is being done.
It sounds like we're just kind of waiting and seeing, and hopefully it doesn't fucking turn out to be the worst.
Yeah, but we'll see what happens.
I hope to be proven wrong.
Yeah.
100%.
Come on, Linda, make it real.
Yeah, like I said, I could go on about this for days and days and days. And it's one of those, you look at it and you think, well, I could have done well, but no, not really. Because it boils down to, these are the people that have the financing. These are the people and those are the ones that get to have a say in what happens to these buildings, what happens to the Springs as a whole. And so, yeah, the fact that she's going to be standing for another 100 years is awesome.
Well,
what that looks like is a completely different story. But maybe our kids will give a fuck enough to do something about it.
Well, I'm honestly waiting for the 200th anniversary where John Suthers is a head in a jar, and he's like, well, it made it to the end of the 2nd century, and it was at a great benefit to our taxpayers.
Yeah, whatever.
Well, yeah,
whatever.
I'm so glad. Victoria, thank you so much for coming on our little production here where we talk about our city. It was great to hear your perspective, and just
Thank you
the
for
passion,
having me.
absolutely, just the passion around this thing that you love and the city loves, and has gradually become irrelevant, unfortunately, to our generation. As a venue, as a place, as an artifact of our culture that kind of got forgotten when the city blew the fuck up.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, and that's the thing. I'm looking at the both of you, and I have my oldest child is a millennial human, and it's, I know what the City Aud meant to Gen X in Colorado Springs. And it's, I don't know, man. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Yeah. It's, I would like for the Gen Z kids to have some kind of an understanding, of what the City Aud is. As my youngest kid went to Thomas McLaren, and we went on a whole tour downtown when they first started, of all the Thomas McLaren buildings that were here. And I was very proud to show them the City Aud. And it's gonna make me cry, so it's time to say goodbye.
All right, let's get out of here. Thank you, Victoria and Emily. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Victoria. It was wonderful to meet you.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
We'll do this again. Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll have to do it again once they open it.
Yeah.
We see what they've
We're going to do a live stream or something. We're just going to walk around with a phone. It's like, all right, this is the follow-up episode about this thing.
Rar, rar, rar.
Rar, rar, rar. All right. Bye, guys.
Thanks, bye. Bye.
Yeah, so you may have noticed there was some spice there. Again, very passionate discussion about the City Aud, and a lot of hope, a lot of faith. Hopefully, like something really good comes of it, or at least the least bad comes out of that.
At least it's something.
At least it's something. You know what? It's the bare minimum, and I'll take it.
Don't really have much choice.
Yeah, not at this point. And that, if you just won the lottery, you could totally have a whole bunch of choice or just be born rich, or just be really lucky. You could have a voice, apparently, how this whole thing could have happened.
However, regular people don't have the finances to have a voice.
What?
I know. It's shocking.
It
is shocking.
Most people don't have a thing or a control or a voice in something that affects most people.
I know. Well, without a pocketbook full of dollars.
Yeah.
Pocketbook. That's a really old word.
Yeah, it's a pocket calculator in there too. Do we need to tune in to the Badly Needed podcast? Actually, it's like tune in. The heck? Like, do you have to turn on the TV and wait for the tubes to warm up or the radio before you can even hear our podcast?
Right. Somebody go wiggle the rabbit ears.
Yeah, stand over there and hold the. Emily, can you get us out of here?
I certainly can, Nick. Badly Needed and Long Overdue is a podcast about shaking things up in a conservative city. The show was hosted by Nick Raven and Emily Lewis, which is me. You can watch the video version of this show on YouTube and listen to us in podcast form literally everywhere you find podcasts. Our theme music is by the Knockblockers. They're a local ska band, very awesome. Highly recommend you find them on social media, or maybe get lucky enough to see a live performance by the Knockblockers. They are performing within, Colorado Springs. You can reach us on a whole bunch of different social media platforms too, like Instagram at Badly Needed Podcast, on Twitter at Badly Needed COS, that's capital COS, on Facebook at Badly Needed and Long Overdue Podcasts, and my baby, my precious, precious little baby that I've created so much content for, on TikTok at Badly Needed Podcast. Now, I do want to add a little thing here. There is no current TikTok content. At this point, I may not ever make any content. We're just going to talk about the fantastic content. We're going to talk about
all of the reams and reams of TikTok content that we have at Badly Needed Podcast.
You can still go like us, though, and follow us.
Yes.
Follow us on the TikToks.
So when we do,
you will be the first to know. You'll be the first to know. So, all right, Nick.
All right, we are Badly Needed and Long Overdue, and we hope you'll tune in and warm up your radio so that you can listen to our little podcast next time. Bye.
Boom, 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 boom.
Chugga, 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 chugga. Boom, boom, boom.